The senior priestess and I just finished a long day of work within our own sphere of communications, the communications network that is necessary to continue the family community's mental, physical, and spiritual growth and development. I'm going to ask you to just comment.
If one cannot maintain a sense of inner peace, there's no way that one can relate to anyone else in a peaceful nature. And first and foremost, we have to look at the masculine and feminine relationships, starting with the parenting relationship, because as you've said, High Priest Kwatamani, the feminine energy, the female, the mother spirit, she is the first teacher. And just having the experience within the sisterhood and observing within my own experiences as a nurturer, what is received from the masculine energy, whether one consciously or unconsciously chooses to do so, one ends up nurturing. And the level and degree of hurt and harm and damage and heartfelt, heartbreaking memories that the female continues to carry is actually what she has as the root, base, and foundation of all of her nurturing. And even though she may have other intentions, and even though she may make every effort to do otherwise, what will come out is the nature of energy that she has nurtured within her own consciousness.
Well, you know, when you speak about the fact that the feminine nurtures what is brought to her, and then when we think about the fact of a master program, the Willie Lynch syndrome is how we're going to call it, and the fact that we know for an absolute fact that there were populations who were purposefully bent and broken like animals and actually identified as animals without making any excuses but facing the holistic living reality. It should then become very clear the degeneration that continued on and on, that those patterns that were established to break the masculine and feminine energy, that pattern that was used to take the nurturer, the first teacher, and turn her in reverse of her natural and innate energies of giving nurturing affection to her mate. And that male reversing his energies into a stud-like being who will always be on the prowl, rolling stone, looking for somewhere, somehow, to be able to get a moment of pleasure or a good meal or whatever he can get, because he's so insecure, unstable, and in those relationships, that she who has then been reversed into the opposite nature of her being, becoming his worst nightmare by purpose and on design, in order to keep him in his place as the master system would want it, all the way up until today, 2018, May, going into June, and thereafter, I'm sure. What I would wonder is, with us knowing for a fact that we must reverse that opposition curse, we must reverse that pale nightmare, we must reverse the Willie Lynch syndrome. Whether someone say it was real or it wasn't real, it's insanity. It's absolutely a fact of life that did manifest and continues to manifest up until this very day. We know that what we have to do is to create a new generation of thought and reasoning and action. Yet, we're facing a tremendous dilemma, because the feminine she, who has been groomed and conditioned to stand as the master warlord, the overlord's protection, the one who actually protects his social order, his being that dominant male, the alpha male, he who came and saw and conquered, He who have declared himself as the impenetrable penetrator. He who has declared that he has all rights just based on skin tone. We have to comprehend that when we say it is not about the color of one's skin, but rather about the state of consciousness that one lives within, we have to then comprehend the state of consciousness of she, the first teacher, becomes the most important factor if we are to survive this toxic state, if we are to resurrect from this cold and pale nightmare. What say you?
It's very difficult to accept the level and degree of accountability that we as females have in this situation, because so often what is in the forefront of our perceptions is the victimization, the abuse, and the fact that throughout so much of the social order and the various systems of that social order, the female is positioned in an inferior status. However, if we tap into our ancestral knowing, there's a tremendous amount of strength within femininity, and it has been systematically degraded and reduced for a reason. And that reason is very clearly seen, High Priest, as you speak about a warlord culture, someone whose main goal and objective is to invade and to conquer and to enslave. When you consider what has happened to the female, and when she considers what has happened to her, it's very easy to feel that the blame is somewhere else because of that weak and vulnerable state that has been designed and is a part of a master plan.
When you speak of design and master plan, what is very clear is that you do indeed realize that without the sacred ancestral feminine she, without her nurturing vibration being realigned, without her being able to birth a new consciousness of male and female, recognizing that every ounce of our life presence is in the hands of the feminine she at those early stages in our lives. Recognizing that if you have a culture that has penetrated her thinking and caused her to think from a patriotic standpoint, or to actually then become a matriarch. And what I'm talking about here is something very simple, something that was called the patriarch of the white brotherhood, and his manipulation of a black matriarch. Now, it's strange, but when you look at the Willie Lynch syndrome, you see this very clearly. This is the point that I'm just anxious to hear from that senior ancestral feminine she within you.
Dealing gut level, honest and sincere within those feminine emotions. There are a lot of places that get covered up and remain hidden because it's very difficult to face and acknowledge. But part of the process of detoxing and purging to heal is that we have to confront certain truth about the nature of energy that the mass majority of females have been indulging in within a social order and within a culture that is a dominant global culture. Although there are many nationalities and ethnocentric groups that have their own identification, by and large there's one dominating cultural consciousness, and it is male dominated. It is of a warlord nature that continues to repeat a pattern of invasion, slaughter, rape, enslavement, and colonization over and over again. And while the male is targeted for elimination and slaughter, it is the female who is targeted for rape and sexual assault and violations upon her essence, to the point that she then is degraded and lowered into a nature of consciousness where she actually ends up nurturing the energies of a conquering male who has been at the forefront of desecrating and destabilizing her ancestral way of life. Not only that, her ancestral male has been so terribly demoralized and placed within systematic breakdown that if she were to really look at it, she would be in torment and misery and anguish to just have to face that reality. So there are many things that come into play. The female has to survive, and she has to make a way, and oftentimes feels unprotected, feels vulnerable, and at the heart of the matter, she feels anger, resentment, and bitterness because that masculine presence that is supposed to be her guiding and protecting strength is not present.
Isn't that something? So it's a vicious circle. He's been birthed to be a lower, lesser male, to be birthed to be inferior in his consciousness, birthed to actually seek and search, to try and emulate an energy that opposes existence. And then within that, she's expecting, based upon something within her DNA encode, him to step up to the plate and to be that divine guiding and protective male. And here's the worst case scenario. She continues to birth the nature of energy that opposes her existence as the sacred ancestral feminine she. So it's a vicious circle. How in the world can it happen? How can we break this toxic, vicious circle under those circumstances? Willie Lynch really did a tremendous job. It has every feminine she, or the mass majority of she, and the he's, seeking and searching to join a lynch party on any male who stands opposed to the dominant culture. And as a result of that, any male like I, who stand in a whole different shadow of life, a higher peace conscious way of life, will then be targeted and declared as an occult leader, an occultist, just as what happened back in the days when there was an attack on ancient Kemet, and the Kemetic culture was declared as an occult culture, and the priests were slaughtered, and the temples were burned. And then you have the feminine she, the melanin encoded feminine she, who has been twisted in reverse, being the loyal supporter and having no problem to attempt to rip the heart out of any ancestral male who stands up firmly against what she has been taught, groomed, and conditioned to idolize and worship in her thoughts, her reason, and her action. So it appears as though this problem is nearly impossible to resolve. So with that being the case, why would you, and why would these sisterins of the Kwatamani Royal Sisterhood have the guts and nerve, the audacity, as some of your mothers have said, to actually join forces with the I? Well, over 20 years, you've been with this vibration, or somewhere close to it. What would cause you to want to join forces with a nature, a whole nature of energy that seeks higher peace, when the warlord is the dominant culture?
You know, it's been said many times that so many of us are searching for a father figure, but there's truth in that statement. You see, it's about the divine union of masculine and feminine energy is not a monotheistic frame of reference where there is a male god, a monotheistic he, nor is there a female goddess, a monotheistic she. It's not a patriarchy. It's not a matriarchy. It's a divine union of masculine and feminine energy, two parts that work together in oneness. Both are essential and both are needed, and that connection is, as you say, the essence of life and supreme love. So that desire is there, very, very strong. It's in code. The female desires to connect with a masculine energy that will elevate her femininity. Unfortunately, what we see is a terrible corruption and degradation of that natural and innate need, and it's been lowered into lust and sexual promiscuity. It's been lowered into physical encounters,
perversion,
that never satisfy or fulfill what is truly a natural and innate longing. And it becomes very frustrating. And the female, after she has been betrayed, becomes very bitter. So what happens is you have young females who are open to the possibility, and what they encounter is the nature of masculine energy that has been bred and has been nurtured by mama, spoiled and turned into an image of a sexual predator, a domineering male who has no true respect or comprehension of femininity, who sees her as a physical object, as a burden, or as a possible conquest. But that does not erase that natural and innate need and desire.
And so what you're actually saying is that this deep longing desire, which is actually a DNA encode, this DNA encode within you continues to long for a higher peace conscious state of being. No matter how much disruption and interruption that opposition nature has caused upon you. And so with that, it actually gives you enough guts, focus, tenacity, drive, will to follow the I and I out here in the jungle and live, quote, off the land and do this thing to build our own houses, to be able to plant our own food and to build our own basketball courts and to do all of the various things out, track down there into the jungle and etc. And to take these youth and give them a different focus, a different direction than what we have had, so that they will have the opportunity to carry the baton of higher peace into the generation thereafter. Can you imagine? 20 years later, our children, the little ones, have grown to be adults. Those adults have had children. And before we know it, those children will be having children. And whether we're here physically on the scene or just within our spirit conscious being as a soul, that longing desire to keep that baton forward shall continue into perpetuity. And therefore, it becomes very clear to you, your feminine essence, and it becomes clear to the I and I, because what I have known very clearly is that he without she is an impossibility. That's why it is absolute nonsense to talk to I and I about a monotheistic God. Don't want to hear it. It's insane. And first and foremost, he can't be birthed, because it is the womb of the mother from which we all come. So I could feel your emotions today, and I caught you off guard after a long day of work. But what you've had to say, I'm sure, penetrates the consciousness of someone within the sacred few. I don't know if you had any closing words.
Yes, I do, High Priest. A method of coping and survival within a culture that's very cold and promotes individualism, where every individual feels that they have to look out for his or herself. And you can never really trust or open up, because that nature of energy is a very deceptive and manipulative and capitalizing nature of energy. And that is reflected in the nature of relationships that one encounters within that dominant culture. The relationships are superficial, and one plays any number of games hoping to gain an advantage or at least get one's basic needs met one way or the other. And that does not touch the spiritual connection that is so necessary in order to feed and uplift the soulful essence of she. Individualism and that self-asserting nature of being independent, it creates a very hard and cold protective shield around the female. It makes her harsh and demanding, and it really ends up disrupting that gentle, natural, and warm tone that is femininity.
And it's soothing to the male.
Yes.
You see, so we're been put in opposition. When the Willie Lynch syndrome say that the he and the she was flipped in opposites, it becomes very clear that instead of moving forward, we have been twisted into a vibration of moving farther and farther away from each other. And within that, the vicious circle continues until a crash course collision, an implosion occurs. And that's when it gets down to the heartless vibration of seeking to destroy the other. And now you have been really pulled into that toxic parallel of destruction beyond any of our imagination. So a sacred few must focus on our holistic living survival by any means divinely necessary. It may not be that many, because self is so dominating. Self is so controlling. Self is all about me, I, my, and have no desire to look at the realities of a higher peace, conscious, resurrecting energy. Even this divine social, economic, family, community order, to see the glorious events that have occurred, to see the movement that we have made. There are those who are hell-bent on destroying it all. But life is for those living in divine order. So we must stay with life and must stay living in divine order. And for this, I say, Madasi, Madasi, Madasi to the ancestors and to the sacred ancestral feminine she and to the masculine he, who got the guts to unify into divine social, economic, family, community order.